Hello. All right. So for this video, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to, well, basically my design process when I'm box pleating a design, from finding a subject to drawing a stick figure to doing the square packing, and then also square or rectangle packing, and then also doing a full crease assignment. So our subject of the day is the Shark Puppy or Puppy Shark by VRES. If you do Shark Puppy on the Google machine, you will find an incredibly darling comic. So go check that out. It's just cute as heck. So what I did is I Google image searched Puppy Shark, and what you're looking for when you're looking for a picture of your subject is something as close to a plan form as possible. So or plan view is what I mean. So if we look here, planes and vehicles typically have plan views, and what you're looking for is mostly like a top down and side, an engineering drawing that an engineer would use to create the thing. Now, with cartoon characters and things like that, unless an artist has actually gone through the trouble of making a plan form, they're not going to be easy to find. So what you want to find is something where you get like a good view of all of the appendages of whatever it is that you're going to try to model. So this was the best I could find at the time for Shark Puppy or Puppy Shark, or however you want to say it. So we're going to use this as our plan view. And then we're going to draw a stick figure from it, and we're going to think about how we want to make Shark Puppy. So there's a couple options that I'm going to consider here. One would be to make the head two flaps. One for the one for the sort of like where the actual head, and then one for the sort of head's dorsal fin situation. Now, that's possible, but when you get two flaps are a lot of work, so to speak. And really what I think could be achieved here is just to make one really long flap for the head and fin, and then reverse fold that flap back to kind of get like a continuous head and flap region. So what I'm going to do is, rather than make two flaps for the head and the dorsal fin that's on the head, is to just make a really long flap for the head. So how does that manifest in the stick figure? Well, I'm going to grab my line drawing tool from MS Paint, and I'm just going to, the size, this is too small. So I'm just going to make a, wait, that's just the pencil. Oi, oi. Come on. Where is the line tool? Shapes, line, yes. Out of practice with MS Paint. So I'm going to make a pretty long line for the head. And then the other thing you want to do when you're making this stick figure is look at what you think the smallest flap is going to be. What is the smallest flap size going to be? And right here, it looks like the bottom of the rear tail here, the bottom fin, is much smaller, so that could be my smallest flap size. What I'm going to do for the sake of simplicity, though, is I'm going to say that the top of the fin and the legs are all the same length, and then I'm going to achieve this smaller flap size by just folding a one-size flap in on itself, rather than make everything else a two-size flap just so I can have one single one-size flap. It just makes my life a little bit easier. So we're going to say that the legs and tail sections, like the fins coming off of those are all one-length flaps. So then I have to ask myself, well, if I'm going to double the head back on itself, if I'm going to reverse fold the head back on itself, how long do I want the head to be in units of the tail? So it looks like the head itself might be like a couple tails long, plus I want to fold it back on itself half of the way. So then this looks like it's also 2, so I'm actually going to make this one a 5. So we're going to make this a 5. Type in, this is a 5. Excellent. All right, so now we go back and we'll go back to our line tool. And then now I want to look at like what do we think there's an appreciable neck here, or can I just go straight in the legs? Can the legs and the head come out of the same point? And I'm going to say, yeah, for simplicity's sake, they come out of the same point. So I'll make one leg there and another leg there. Sounds good. And I've already said that these are going to be 1. So I'm going to make them 1. And then I want to look at this body region. Now, the body seems like it's really short. I could probably almost get away with no body section at all. However, this shark kind of in other drawings looks like there might be like a leg worth of space in between there. And also, shark puppy or puppy shark is often drawn with a kind of a big inflated belly there. So I definitely want some paper dedicated to the torso section so I can hopefully try to shape it to make it look more rounded and adorbs. So I'm going to add another section for the... I'm going to add another line segment here for the interior. Cool. And then I'm going to make this a 1. And then I'm going to add the back legs. So same deal. I'm sorry if you're watching this and you're way better at MS Paint than I am. I know watching someone who's bad at your software can be sad. So it looks like there's a tail that goes out. I'll add the segments later. There's a tail that goes out and then bifurcates into the 2 fins. So I'm going to do that. And like I said, instead of making the bottom half shorter, I'm just going to reverse fold that in. So remember, when you're making these stick figures, you're making a base. So there's like a bird base for a paper crane, but the bird base for the paper crane has been used to make thousands upon thousands of different designs. So we don't need to have our proportions exactly correct. Usually you want to err on the side of making something a bit longer because it's much easier to fold a flap back in on itself than it is to try to make a flap appear larger than it actually is. This tail section, I'm going to look at a few of these. It looks like the tail is about as long as the fin is tall. So I can look at a few examples here and convince myself, yeah, I mean, it looks like it's, you know, it's about the same length. So I'm going to also make all of these 1s. Okay, cool. So that's great. So when you're making these stick figures, especially if you're box pleating, it helps you to try to use as few different numbers as possible, because then the flaps, the squares and rectangles and rivers and all those things that you put in your crease pattern will be a bit easier to lay out, and you'll be able to use a smaller grid. Why do we want to use a smaller grid? Well, it's less pre-creasing, and it also will generally give you just a larger model that you can shape a little bit better. You don't have to use a galaxy-sized piece of paper if most of your proportions are the same, right? You need a larger grid if you have wildly different proportions for things. So, oh, I didn't label. So everything here's a 1 except for the head, which is a 5. Great. So we have a puppy shark base. This will be our base for our puppy shark. And so now we can move over to Origami, which is really nice software for doing some box pleating, just putting some creases down. So I like to start with a size 8 grid and see if I can get away with that. If I need a bigger grid, then I'll use a bigger grid, but and we'll find out if I think I need that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that mountain is selected up here in the top left. I'm going to select this tool here. If you're using the Origami mod, which you can just Google and find, you can easily add and remove keybinds for these. The default one for this is L. I made this one back quote, as you see, which is the number left of 1 on your keyboard. And then I made all of these 1, 2, 3, and 4. And these are the most common tools you're going to use in Origami for drawing lines. The other common tool you're going to use already has a wonderful keybind, and that is here, flip mountain and valley. So you can use this tool to flip the direction of folds, and that keybind is C for change. So change the direction of folds. Excellent. That's probably most of what we're going to use here until we get to full crease assignment. So what I want to do is for each flap in here, I'm going to want to put a water bomb base into this grid. The diagonal of the distance from the center of the water bomb base to the along the diagonal to the one of the corners, how many grid slices it goes through will be the length of the flap that base folds into. So if I have my 5 grid here, or my 8 grid here, let's make it a 16 for a second, just to illustrate. So if I want to put the tail flap in the center of my design, I will be making, this cuts through 4, see that cuts through 4, this cuts through 5, okay? When I come down here, it cuts through 5, down here, it cuts through 5, and it cuts through 5, right? And so this center of this water bomb base here, this water bomb base crease pattern, will be the tip of the flap. It'll be the tip of the head fin conglomerate, right? And it's using since it's 5, it's using 10 by 10 blocks here. It's using 100 blocks, which is a lot considering I only have a 16 by 16 square. It's using a lot of the real estate here. So one thing that you can do to cheat this is that we actually only need the tip of the flap on the square of paper, which means if we move this more towards the side, we'll be able to use, if we can chop it off with the edge of the paper, we can get a smaller version of the flap. So I could do something like this. Boop. And boop. And boop. And this will still give me a 5 flap. And now I'm only using, what is this? 6 times 10, I'm using 60 instead of 100. But I can push it off the side even further. And I can go to here. And here. Boom. And now I'm only using 50. I'm only using half of it. But we can do even better. We can cut this off, and we can put the center of the water bomb base right there in the corner. And that's what I'll do, right? Because this is now using only 25 grid squares. And if I go back to my size 8 and I make this... if I go back to my size 8 and I make this a 5 by... If I make this a 5, it'll come to here, which leaves me some space around here for the rest of my shenanigans. Now, I have a suspicion that I'll need a larger grid size to make this work, but let's just try it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a 1 size water bomb base where the center is on the edge of the paper over here, and a 1 size over here. And I'm going to use auxiliary folds here to mark the edge of my water bomb bases, just so that you guys can see it. These auxiliary folds are really just ways of putting comments into your crease pattern to add structural features. This software will just kind of ignore them. It'll still render them and everything, but if you try to fold your model up, it'll just ignore them for the most part. I think it might show you where they are on the final folded model, which is a fun thing to play with. Okay, so this I've put the head here and then the legs here, and the ordering of these is important, right? So I have leg, head, leg. And so this is leg, head, leg. So if I actually wanted to draw this a bit more accurately in MS Paint, what I could do is, wait, I clicked the eraser and it gave me text. MS Paint. If I actually want the top-down view of the crease pattern, I want to put the items like this, right? So if I'm actually looking top-down on Puppy Shark, it goes leg, head, leg, you know, and then all of that's separated by the body section, and then there's, right? So the idea being that if I go clockwise around my crease, around my stick figure and encounter appendages, I should hit them in the same clockwise order. So if I get leg, head, leg, when I look in my crease pattern, I have leg, head, and leg going around clockwise. So I know that I'm set up pretty well. If I put both of the legs together, then it would look weird in my final product. It might still work, but it's probably unlikely. Okay, so now I need to put in a river. So the river is going to be used for this body section here. So if I get, like, So actually we'll make a river. And so the river is going to be representing this line segment. And so the river is running through, and it's separating this set of flaps here, these 3 flaps, from the rest of the model over here, right? So how do I make a river in a box pleated design? Well, what I do, I can use these auxiliary folds to make a little snake that weaves around my crease pattern, and it separates out the head and forelegs from the rest of the model, which will be Tetris down here in the bottom. Okay? And that's all. It just has to be 1 wide. It has to be 1 wide for the whole river, right? You can't expand to 2 and then contract back to 1. Now, some of you watching this might be like, oh yeah, you can actually do that and blah, blah, blah. That's an advanced thing. You actually can change the width of rivers, but we're not going to talk about how to do that right now because it's complicated. But let's just suffice it to say that this is enough. Now we actually have to add real creases into the river. Sometimes you don't. If a river runs straight, completely straight for its entire length, then you don't have to add any creases at all that you don't want to. But here we actually do because it turns. So every time the river bends, you want to build a bridge across the river with a mountain fold. So let's do that. So I'm going to grab my line tool. And so we see the river bends here. So I'm going to cross the river like this, right? And you want to make sure that you're going from one bank of the river to the other side of the river. This is just going from this side of the river to the same side of the river. So it's not correct. You actually want to bridge across the river. Same here, bridge across. Same here, bridge across. Here, bridge across. Same here, bridge across. And many times that you'll find that when you draw these bridges, they'll be extending a mountain fold that you already have. Great. Okay. So now we want to have the back legs and then another 1 river and then the tail section. So, all right. I think we can do that. So now I'm now wondering, is it better to do this is a 1 flap or this is a 1 flap? I'm not quite sure. So I'm going to put that in as a 1 flap, and then I'll see how this river looks. So I'll put it in, and I'll put symmetry across. There's actually a way where we could draw just half of it and then reflect it across, which would make us only have to do half of our design. But this is a small enough grid. It's fine. We can do it this way. Okay. So now I need a river that separates these 2 flaps from the tail section. So what I'll do is I think I'm just going to make a river. Oh, let's add some auxiliary creases here. I'm just going to make a river that goes like this. Okay, so this is a 1 wide river. Oops, I forgot this one. A 1 wide river. 1 wide river that separates the forelegs from the hind legs. And oh my gosh, I hadn't tried this out, but it looks like it just works. So I put a hind leg in there. Oh no, these aren't the hind legs. I'm separating the tail. I'm separating the tail from the front. And I actually get enough to plug in a little tail, a third tail nub in there. Maybe I'll find some use for that when I fold it up. Maybe I'll just fold it out of the way. It doesn't matter. It's just a way of getting rid of that 1 cube. Okay. We also have to remember to put our bridges on our river every time it bends. And like I said, usually you'll find that they're extending existing mountain folds. And then we have this issue, this block right here. There's nothing in here. It's unused space. There's a few things you can do to solve this problem. The first thing that you should try is to see if you can stretch a square that you've already put down into a rectangle. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this square here and I'm going to stretch it into a rectangle. So I'm going to delete these lines and I'm going to stretch it. Stretch it out. Like that. And now I've stretched it up to fill the space, and we'll repeat over here. Excellent. If you want to stretch a square that's fully contained within the crease pattern, I'll show you over here on MS Paint so we don't have to delete nothing. Don't have to delete nothing. Okay, so say I have a square. Like this. Right? So say I have a square and I want to stretch it to be a rectangle. What you basically do is you cut the square in half either vertically or horizontally. So what I'll do is I will erase, we'll cut it in half vertically. And then you move the other half away to fill in a gap. Like maybe I'm filling in a gap over here. And then you just connect the two ends with a line. So here I did it on the edge of the paper, which means that this other half didn't exist. So like there's a phantom cutoff line. Oh, the phantom cutoff line is the same color. Right? There's a phantom cutoff line where this is the edge of the paper, and we don't have to see any of this because it's off the paper. Just like when I use only a quarter of my water bomb base to fill this in. Okay, so now I'm kind of done. Kind of. So the first step is find a good picture of your subject, preferably a plan view. If you're doing a vehicle, you'll usually be able to find a plan view. The second thing is to draw a stick figure that you think approximates its proportions. The third thing you do is what we're doing here, which is just pack squares and rectangles and rivers in a way that represents this stick figure here on the right. Now, you know, is there a specific procedure? No. It's just like if somebody asked you, how do you fit all of your luggage into the trunk of your car so that everything fits? The basic procedure is you take the largest item, which in this case was this big head flap, right? That's our largest flap. I put that in first, and then I try to fit all the smaller bits in around it, all the smaller flaps and rivers in around it, because you want to, and especially in the case of box pleating, you want to cheat the large flaps by putting them in the corners, and that lets you use only a quarter of their normal area. So if you cheat a large flap into a corner, then then maybe you'll have to put some smaller flaps entirely on the paper, but that's not as bad as putting a huge flap entirely on the paper. In fact, an 8x8 grid isn't even big enough to fully contain a 5 size flap. You can only get a 4 size flap out of an 8x8 grid if you use paper for the whole flap. And at that point, that would be a water bomb base. That'll just be a water bomb. I hope that makes sense. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the video here. We're going to call this part 1. What you can do actually is take a piece of paper, fold it into an 8x8 grid, fold all of these red mountain folds in, and then try to Rubik's Cube your way into figuring out how this folds into a base. It's totally possible. I've been doing it for a while. It takes a while to do, but it also kind of helps you how this design process works. If you're willing to install origami, there's a way that you can get a full specification of your crease pattern using a few rules, and I'm going to dedicate a whole video to that because it's complicated, but it can save you the time and guesswork of trying to just collapse using the square packing. All right, so see you in the next one.